is my daughter's school, Governor. Please tell me what you're going to do. I'm not going to hurt him, I promise.
Literally. In this video, Trump is sentenced for the Stormy Daniels case. Biden announces that the federal government will cover all costs associated with the California fires. Mark Zuckerberg says that the Biden administration put undue pressure on Facebook to censor Americans. And the LA Fire Department chief warned just a month ago that cuts in the fire department budget was going to lead to the fires we have today. Judge Merchant sentenced Trump today, but he gave him an unconditional discharge. Essentially, the whole thing is meaningless. It was given as a present to the left-wing media so that they can say things like convicted President Trump. Here's Jonathan Turley on Fox News explaining as such. Take a look.
This was a thrill kill, and this was the thrill. And ultimately, this court imposed no punishment at all, but did give Trump's critics what they wanted. That is to label him as a convicted felon. It's sentencing by soundbite. This is now going to be repeated like a mantra in the media as he takes his oath of office, that this is the first convicted felon to take the oath, even though this case may not last. I mean, the verdict against Trump has a very good chance of being overturned. The verdict against the New York legal system is going to be far more lasting. It allowed itself to be weaponized. It allowed itself to be the product of lawfare. And that's going to leave a much more lasting mark than I think this verdict on Trump.
Prior to the decision, the judge did point out the extraordinary circumstances with this case.
I can argue that the trial itself was in many respects somewhat ordinary. The same cannot be said about the circumstances surrounding this sentencing. And that is because of the office you once occupied and which you will soon occupy again. It is the legal protections afforded to the office of the President of the United States that are extraordinary. The legal protections, especially within the context of a criminal prosecution, afforded to the office of the President have been laid out by our founders, the Constitution, and most recently interpreted by the United States Supreme Court.
The judge later goes on to explain his sentencing using the Supremacy Clause and presidential immunity.
And it was the citizenry of this nation that recently decided that you should once again receive the benefits of those protections, which include, among other things, the Supremacy Clause and presidential immunity. It is through that lens and that reality that this court must determine a lawful sentence. This court has determined that the only lawful sentence that permits entry of a judgment of conviction without encroaching upon the highest office in the land is an unconditional discharge, which the New York State Legislature has determined is a lawful and permissible sentence for the crime of falsifying business records in the first degree.
Now, obviously not everyone is happy with this decision. Here's what Speaker Mike Johnson had to say about this sentence. This entire case against President Trump has been a politically motivated and contrived witch hunt aimed solely at preventing him from returning to the White House. It was never about the facts, and it should have never been brought up in the first place. The judge grossly perverted the American legal system by manipulating existing law in a purely partisan effort to convert a bogus misdemeanor charge into a felony. Judge Merchant and the deranged prosecution have done untold damage to our justice system. Meanwhile, fires continue to blaze in Southern California. President Biden posted this tweet this morning. I'm announcing that the federal government will cover 100% of the cost of measures to protect lives and property in Southern California for 6 months. I've told the governor and officials to spare no expense and do whatever they need to contain the fires and protect families. As you'd expect, people couldn't help but compare and contrast between Biden's willingness to help California and what he did for North Carolina. North Carolina got $750 and the people of California get a blank check. This is how money is laundered. So the people of North Carolina get a $750 loan, but California gets all the money they want. And this is because they pushed the liberal agenda. This is literally why we all say FJB. Man, that was fast. Why couldn't you have that much of a response for the people of Western North Carolina or for East Palestine? How about Ohio? And we can't forget the title of this article from the New York Post that says, the feds say there's no money left to respond to the hurricanes after FEMA used $640 million this year on migrants. Now, I can understand Biden's decision to do this, since the press for the Democrats hasn't been that great lately, given that both the governor and the mayor made fools of themselves earlier this week.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster?
Now, clearly that's a bad look, but it gets worse because just today, the LA Fire Department chief just announced that 1 month ago, only a month ago, he had said that things were getting dire because of the budget cuts. The Los Angeles Fire Department chief warned a month ago that a near $18 million budget cut had plunged it into unprecedented operational challenges, which would hamper its ability to respond to large-scale emergencies. Quite ominous there. Chief Kristen Crowley sounded off on the budget cuts in a December 4th memo viewed by Fox News Digital, where she foresaw what she described as the cascading impacts the cost-saving measures would have on the department. The city slashed $17.6 million from the LA Fire Department in its latest budget, and the decision has come in for scathing criticism as several monster fires ripped through the county with at least 10 people already announced dead from the disaster. Not a good look, neither for the mayor nor for the governor, given that even Gavin Newsom couldn't avoid criticism on the streets.
Newsom? That's the governor. That's the governor. Governor, I live here, governor. That was my daughter's school, Governor. Please tell me what you're going to do. I'm not going to hurt him, I promise.
I'm literally talking to the president right now to specifically answer the question of what we can do for you and your daughter.
Can I hear it? Can I hear your call? Because I don't believe it.
California Governor Gavin Newsom is being criticised by some for water mismanagement as hydrants ran dry while fires multiplied.
So I have to get cell service.
So let's get it. Let's get it. I want to be here when you call the president.
I appreciate it. I'm doing that right now. And it's to immediately get reimbursements, individual assistance, and to help you. I'm devastated for you. I'm so sorry, especially for your daughter. I have 4 kids losing the school.
Everyone who went to school there, they lost their home.
Well, it's kind of hard to say you're literally on the phone with somebody when you don't have cell service at the time. Logic rarely enters the equation when it comes to politicians. Really, they're just playing a big game of hot potato, passing accountability on and on as quickly as they can before they burn their hands. Speaking of accountability, Mark Zuckerberg on the Joe Rogan podcast today said that the Biden administration put their boot on the neck of Facebook, forcing them to silence citizens' speech with anything to do with vaccines. Check it out.
It was during the Biden administration when they were trying to roll out the vaccine program. And I'm generally pretty pro rolling out vaccines. I think on balance, the vaccines are more positive than negative. But I think that while they're trying to push that program, they also tried to censor anyone who is basically arguing against it. And they pushed us super hard to take down things that were honestly were true, right? I mean, they basically pushed us and said, anything that says that vaccines might have side effects, you basically need to take down. And I was just like, well, we're not going to do that. We're clearly not going to do that. I mean, that is kind of inarguably true.
Who is they? Who's telling you to take down things that
it was
talk about vaccine side effects?
It was people in the Biden administration.
It's nice to see Mark 2.0 growing up so quickly. And finally, bad news for TikTok, as the Supreme Court hearings earlier today didn't seem to be going in their favor. Justices across the ideological spectrum raised doubts that the TikTok ban even implicated the First Amendment. That's a bad sign for TikTok because to win, it has to prove first that the First Amendment applies in the case, and then that the law has failed to meet its test. So unless TikTok can find a way to get the law that Congress made saying that TikTok needs to be sold to nationals, essentially, so it's no longer owned by any Chinese corporations or people. If the Supreme Court doesn't block that law by January 19th, then TikTok will no longer be able to be updated, and people who currently have TikTok, that app can stay on their phones, but it'll eventually go out of date, become buggy, and you won't be able to use it anymore. Now, they state that it's a national security thing. I think it's more of a competition thing. We'd much rather have our kids on platforms and making money for American tech companies that pay taxes in America. Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar says, for years, the Chinese government has sought to build detailed profiles about Americans, where we live and work, who our friends are and coworkers are, and what our interests are and what our vices are. Now, this is true for every tech company, Google and Facebook included in that. So I think that it's just unfair to make it all about that. She later goes on to say that the immense data set was a powerful tool for harassment, recruitment, and espionage. Kavanaugh said that the Congress was concerned that China was accessing information about millions of Americans, tens of millions of Americans, including teenagers, people in their 20s, and that the country might use that information to turn people, to blackmail people who a generation from now will be working in the FBI or the CIA or in the State Department. As a content creator myself, I worry about TikTok content creators. I don't think that they can necessarily just move their audience over to another platform. I don't think that audiences are easily moved to other platforms. Particularly people on YouTube would just move their entire audience to Rumble if it was just that easy. Now, the creators do have representation in this case, and in fact, Jeffrey Fisher had this exchange with Amy Coney Barrett earlier today.
What about, so I think this goes to Justice Gorsuch's questions about antitrust divestiture. Let's say that for antitrust reasons, or let's even say not for that. Let's say for suspect First Amendment reasons, Congress tells Jeff Bezos that he has to divest in the Washington Post. You know, he can no longer own the Post. And let's say that neither Bezos nor the Post challenges that. But let's say that you represent clients who really like the Post as it was, who really want to keep receiving the Post, who really want to publish op-eds in the Post.
Yeah.
Would you have standing? Like, what kind of a claim would you be making there?
I believe so, Justice Barrett, and the court has cited Lamont and other cases in more recent years to say we've recognized a right of American listeners to receive information from others. And remember, even that is a lot. That's only a small part of the argument I'm making on behalf of the creators. You know, I don't mean to diminish Mr. Francisco's arguments on behalf of the company and ByteDance, but the core speech in front of you in this case are the videos and other forms of communication that people like my clients are posting by the millions every day on this platform to share with other Americans. Regulating the content because you don't think it's going to be pro-American enough or it's going to be too pro-foreign interest is just verboten under the First Amendment. That's the history and tradition. And just if you're not in a world of scarcity where licensing is impossible, you cannot give the government, and in this more extreme example, the president himself, unbridled discretion to choose who is a proper owner of a speech platform in this country. Because it is so hand in hand with viewpoint. As I said earlier, any number of owners of big media enterprises, whether they be Americans or foreign citizens, could be accused of having a particular viewpoint, but speakers who engage in those platforms have choices they can make. And so, you know, on behalf of our creator clients, we find it not at all satisfactory to be told, well, look, just go post somewhere else. TikTok has a distinct editorial and publicational perspective, and it particularly benefits people like my clients who are not famous people, they're not actors from Hollywood who have a lot of people following them, they're ordinary American citizens whose content that they create on the platform gets privileged by way of the quality of that content. And that's what's so powerful about the platform. So whether you're an ordinary American citizen or, I might add, whether you're a presidential candidate in our last election, if you want to reach new and different audiences, TikTok is the place people go.
Let me know what you think down below in the comments on the TikTok ban. Should the Chinese completely be divested from the company? Should none of it matter? Do we live in a libertarian world? Do you think that TikTok should be banned altogether? I don't think that this is a black or white issue. I think there is gray area here. Let me know. I'm Jake Day. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.